The sun dipped low over the dusty town of Redstone, painting the horizon with a golden fire that stretched long shadows across the wooden boardwalks. Wagons waddled in the distance, their wheels creaking in rhythm with the hooves of tired horses. The air smelled of smoke, leather, and dust, as if the land itself remembered every story etched into its soil. In this place where silence often spoke louder than words, a lone rider appeared. A young cowboy named Eli guided his horse down the main street, hat pulled low, revolver polished, but untouched by cruelty. Eli carried himself with the weight of someone older than his years. He was strong, steady, and his quiet presence seemed to hush even the whispers of the wind. Folks in nearby towns had heard of him, though not for romance or mischief. He had never touched a woman, never courted or danced. His heart guarded like a locked chest no one dared to open. Some said he was shy, others believed he was simply waiting for something or someone worth breaking his silence for. Yet fate often arrives uninvited. Just near the Redstone saloon, a widow named Clara stood alone, her face pale with worry. In her hands, she clutched papers tied to her ranch, the only legacy her late husband left her. Menacing drifters circled nearby, their voices low and cruel, eyes burning with greed. They wanted her land, her security, and her hope. Clara's hand shook, but her back remained straight. She refused to surrender, even though the odds stacked high against her. The town watched, most too afraid to act. Eli's gaze shifted, narrowing on Clara's struggle. His boots hit the dirt as he dismounted, the jingle of his spurs echoing like a warning bell. The murmurs of townsfolk rose, sensing something was about to change. His eyes, calm but unyielding, met Clara's for the first time. Though he had never been close to a woman, there was something about her quiet strength that pulled him forward. She was not just a widow clinging to papers, she was a symbol of survival, and Eli knew the kind of men who preyed on such resolve. The drifters smirked when they noticed Eli. To them, he was just another boy with a revolver he didn't know how to use. But Eli's hand brushed the holster at his side, a motion so natural and measured it spoke volumes. He wasn't here to boast, to draw attention, or to make a name for himself. He was here because something deep in him couldn't allow injustice to breathe freely in front of his eyes. He stood tall, shoulders squared, the fading sunlight glinting off his gunmetal. Clara's lips parted slightly, relief and surprise flickering together. She had been ready to stand her ground alone, but Eli's presence changed everything. It wasn't just his weapon, it was the quiet assurance in his stance, the kind that said he wouldn't back down once he'd chosen a side. Around them, Redstone seemed to hold its breath. The gamblers inside the saloon paused their cards, the barkeep froze mid-polish of a glass, and the blacksmith outside leaned on his hammer, curious to see how this young cowboy would fare. Eli's boots sank into the dust with every slow step forward. The drifters exchanged glances, one spitting into the dirt, the other resting his hand on the butt of his pistol. "This ain't your business, boy," one sneered. But Eli didn't flinch. He had heard those words before, in other towns where lawmen turned their backs, where greed chewed through justice like rot through wood. His voice, when it came, was steady but quiet. "She's not alone." It wasn't a threat, not yet, just the truth spoken aloud, sharp as a blade. The widow's papers fluttered in the light breeze, edges dirt-stained from the scuffle. Clara's eyes, tired but unbroken, lifted toward Eli. For a moment, she saw not just a stranger, but a man willing to stand where others had failed. Eli tipped his hat slightly, his jaw tight with resolve. He knew this wouldn't end with words. Men like those drifters understood only fear, only the language of steel. Though Eli had never drawn first, justice had a way of calling him when others refused to answer. Tonight, in Redstone, that call was clear. The town square grew heavier with tension, as though even the air hesitated to move. Eli's heart pounded, not with fear, but with the awareness that every choice defines a man. He wasn't looking to be a hero, and he wasn't chasing glory. But he also knew that when wrong goes unchallenged, it grows bold. And in that moment, with Clara's ranch hanging in the balance, Eli decided. His hand hovered near his revolver, not trembling, but patient. The drifters laughed, mistaking youth for weakness. They would soon learn the difference. Eli shifted his weight slightly, boots firm in the dirt. The shadows of Redstone stretched longer as night crept closer. The widow clutched her papers tighter, a silent prayer passing her lips. Eli caught the faintest trace of her voice, and something within him steadied further. He had never touched a woman, never spoken sweetly or reached for a hand in the dark, but here he was, standing because she needed someone. His gun, untouched by cruelty but waiting in readiness, was the only thing between her and ruin. Redstone was about to learn what justice looked like when carried by a quiet man. The widow's voice trembled as she pleaded with the sheriff, but his eyes slid away, avoiding the weight of her desperation. The badge on his chest glinted in the lantern light, but it carried no honor. He shifted uncomfortably, muttering excuses about jurisdiction and timing, while the drifters smirked. Their boots scraped the boardwalk as they leaned closer, fingers itching for her papers. Greed hung thick in the air, and Clara's hand shook as she clutched her last proof of ownership. The people of Redstone watched in silence, fearful and unwilling to cross the man who thrived on intimidation. Just then, Eli stepped forward, cutting through the silence like a blade. His words were steady, almost too calm, carrying a weight that silenced the laughter in the saloon's doorway. "Leave the lady be," he said, his voice neither loud nor boastful, but firm as bedrock. The drifters paused, then burst into laughter, the kind that dripped with disbelief. To them, he was nothing more than a boy, a hat too big, revolver too polished, heart too green to understand the rules of the frontier. But Eli's eyes told a different story, one carved by resolve. One drifter, a scar running across his cheek, took a bold step forward. His boots thudded against the wooden planks, his grin wicked and sharp. "You got sand, kid," he spat, "but you don't got sense." Before the words finished leaving his mouth, he lunged, reaching to snatch the papers from Clara's trembling hands. But Eli's revolver cleared leather like lightning, smooth and practiced. A single shot rang out, echoing across the dusty street, the sound sharp enough to freeze every breath. The bullet bit into the dirt, just inches from the outlaw's boots, and silence fell heavy as stone. The crowd gasped, the sheriff flinching though he had done nothing to earn such respect. Dust lifted where the bullet struck. The scent of gunpowder sharpened the air. Eli's arm remained steady, his revolver aimed low but unwavering. He hadn't taken a life, hadn't even drawn blood, but his message was clear. He didn't boast, didn't spit threats into the air like men who lived on bluster. Instead, he stood tall, shoulders squared, his gun whispering what his lips did not. Redstone had seen many drifters swagger, but it had never seen resolve so calm and unshaken. Clara's heart pounded as she looked at him, her breath catching at the sight of his composure. Relief swept through her, chased quickly by awe. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt the heavy weight of fear lift, even if only for a moment. Eli had stepped into the gap where others had failed, and he had done so without hesitation. Her eyes softened, gratitude shining even through the shadows of worry. She clutched the papers closer, her hand brushing her chest as if steadying her racing heart. This young cowboy was unlike anyone she had known. The drifters exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected fear, maybe a desperate bluff. Instead, they faced a man who didn't flinch, who didn't rattle onto their sneers. One outlaw shifted his hand toward his holster, testing the waters. Eli's revolver tilted just slightly, the movement quiet but sharp as a warning bell. The outlaw froze. The tension was unbearable, the air so thick it felt like the whole town held its breath. Even the piano inside the saloon had gone silent, the last note lingering unanswered. Eli stood, unblinking, his revolver steady as stone, daring them to make their choice. The sheriff cleared his throat weakly, finally finding his voice, though it cracked like dry wood. "Now, fellas," he stammered, "ain't no reason for bloodshed." But no one was listening to him anymore. All eyes were fixed on Eli. The boy who had never touched a woman now stood as a wall between innocence and corruption, his gun steady where the law had faltered. A whisper rippled through the crowd, a mix of astonishment and hope. Redstone was a town tired of cowards and tired of bending, and for the first time in a long while, someone stood firm. The scarred drifter scowled, his bravado faltering under Eli's gaze. Slowly, with the sneer meant to save face, he stepped back. His companion cursed under his breath, kicking at the dirt, but he too retreated, unwilling to test the quiet fire in the young cowboy's stance. The threat had not passed entirely, but for tonight, the widow's land remained hers. Clara exhaled shakily, her shoulders trembling with both fear and relief. Eli holstered his revolver with the same smooth calmness, as though the weapon was merely an extension of his will, not a toy to flash or a tool of pride. Clara's eyes lingered on him, her gratitude unspoken but heavy in the air. Eli tipped his hat, cheeks warming with modesty, as though he had done nothing more than water a thirsty horse. He did not linger for thanks, nor did he revel in the awe of the townsfolk. He had never touched a woman, but his courage had touched Clara's heart, stirring something she thought had died with her husband. The people of Redstone would not soon forget this night. In a land where legends were born from dust and steel, a new story had just been written. And so, under the fading glow of lanterns and starlight above, Eli turned his gaze toward the horizon. The drifters had retreated, but he knew they would return, stronger and meaner, carrying vengeance in their pockets. Yet for now, the widow was safe, her land still hers, and the town had seen what it meant when one man chose to stand. Redstone had found a protector it hadn't asked for, but desperately needed. Eli, the cowboy who had never touched a woman, had proven that sometimes a steady hand and a steadfast heart could change the course of a town's fate.